Today, we are live with the one and only Stank Bastard from the Loose Cannons podcast. We are talking about the biggest Buccaneer stories of the week and looking ahead to the Buffalo Bills. A very beatable Buffalo Bills, if we're going to get provocative before the show. Stand by, all that and more on today's Cannon Fire podcast.
I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with the head. Intercepted. At the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew. Joining me today, a man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him a long-winded one anyways. From the Loose Cannons podcast, the founder, CEO, resident host of the Buck and Idiots podcast. One of the more rare Bucs podcasts, I would say.
It's rare. It's really rare. It's rare.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Stank Bastard here is on the Cannon Fire podcast. How you doing today, my friend?
Thanks for having me back, brother. How are you been?
Doing good, staying busy. Getting through the weeks. I think some news like we got today, though, is what makes getting through these weeks a little bit easier. Bucky Irving at the running back position and wide receiver Chris Godwin Jr. both returned to practice today for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, it is important to note that this was a walkthrough practice. Todd Bowles kind of addressed it. Honestly, Bowles didn't say much of anything at all about Chris Godwin. I don't know if that was like on purpose or if it was just because the return of Bucky kind of overshadowed everything else that was going on. But he said in terms of Bucky, excited to get him back, ramp him up, but just have to see what he looks like in a full-speed practice. He had commented last week about he's getting there, he's progressing, but it's all about seeing if he can lower the shoulder and really take a hit and get back to full speed. So it's good to see these guys back. I am not sure about either one of them playing this week. Ben Bredesen also on the injury report. He was out there in a limited capacity today, but Todd Bowles did say it is highly unlikely to see the Buccaneers offensive guard back in the lineup this week. People have been waiting for, some guys to get back into the lineup here, and while it doesn't seem like a sure thing for them to get back this week, it is very positive to see them back in the building regardless. I don't think we've seen either of these guys since, week 4 or 5?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it was even the season. It feels that long ago.
Yeah.
I don't understand the secrecy, honestly. And if it wasn't for somebody on the sideline before the game shooting video of Bucky out there dancing around, just hooting and hollering, high fives, and he looks like he had full range of motion. Looks like he was ready for contact. I think that's what kind of pushed him a little bit, because this is like, X-Files shit. What's really going on, bro? What's going on in that building right now? Because I want to know.
It is incredibly odd because, I can't even think of another season, especially with Todd Bowles as head coach, where they've been this hush-hush about the injuries. And it seems like it's that way with more than just one guy. The Bucky Irving thing was, after 2-3 weeks of him initially being injured, they said, it's a pain tolerance issue. And then as of a couple of weeks ago, Todd Bowles is saying, we're just hoping he can make full contact soon. And it's like, well, that wasn't what you were saying a month ago. And then Hassan Reddick, I still don't think we have a definitive reason as to why he hasn't been playing the last several weeks now, but no sign of him back yet. The Chris Godwin thing was unfortunate with the fibula injury, and we know that it's a hamstring with Ben Bredesen, but I'm sure that I'm missing a couple of guys here when we think about
J-Mac. Oh, by the way, J-Mac's got a broken bone in his neck.
Right, yeah. We're hopeful.
About that randomly.
I mean, Luke Edicky's back in the lineup finally, so we don't have to talk about that, air of mystery surrounding it anymore. But I was going to be surprised if he even had a foot, because you remember his injury was 2 to 3 weeks, and then it ended up being a little bit longer and a little bit longer. So I can't imagine there's any competitive reason to withhold that information. But I mean, a positive update for Bucky and Chris Godwin especially is good news. Hopefully we can get both of those guys back in the lineup before the end of the regular season.
It's not like we've been getting good injury news at all this season. It's just been hit after hit after hit. It's been hard to swallow. And
Yeah.
so any good news, it feels like it's, was like an injection, because I think everybody's kind of licking their wounds. If you follow Bucks fans on social media, the sky is falling. We may as well be 3-6 right now. Season's over. Fire Grizzard, fire Bowles, fire Jason Light. Right? I've heard that too. I've seen that too. And I'm sure he's out there jotting down those Twitter ads so he can later, teabag you when we win a Super Bowl. So
the overreactions are always par for the course, it seems like. But every year, I think people manage to outdo themselves. As far as the Buccaneers on the injury front, though, I think this is where this conversation is going to get interesting, because we're 10 weeks into the season. And as you said, the Buccaneers are 6-3. They beat a pretty damn good Seattle team. Sam Darnold's playing not quite MVP ball, but he's playing really good.
Really good. Played great in the game we beat him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was an offensive, fireworks all day. 38-35, the final score in that one. This season, we've seen the Bucs overcome a lot. We've seen them pull off some miraculous plays, and we've also seen them do all of this missing a lot of their primetime starters. I mean, it's, a domino effect at this point, but it's Mike Evans and then Chris Godwin. And then you talked about Jalen McMillan already, less than a month into the season, and you're down your top 3 wide receivers in that room. So all eyes are going to shift to Emeka Egbuka, who luckily is just a freak, right? I mean, I'll say it. I've said it before. I'll say it again. That's a pick that's always going to age better by the day for good old Jason Light. But I mean, the offensive line. You've got Graham Barton shifting over to left tackle week 1. You've got a bunch of guys who seemingly have never played, that level of football that consistently before. You're moving guys around, been shuffling players all season. I look at the Bucs at 6-3. And I know that this is a take that's been floated out there, but when we start talking about injuries, is there another team in the NFL that is going to be 6-3 with everything the Bucs have gone through this season? I think that is going to factor into every single conversation. We'll start with the offense because we got some spicy quotes this week from the quarterback. We'll dive into that here in a second. But the injuries have to be a talking point 10 games into the season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And people are very quick to say, oh, they're not contenders. They're not the team that we thought they were because they lost to a decent Patriots team. And, they're losing to good teams. And you can say all of that, but I just don't think ignoring the injuries or acting like they happen to every team in the NFL at this level, I don't think that's a realistic take. I think the Bucs, quite honestly, I don't want to say they're lucky to be 6-3, but I mean, Stank, we've watched it every week. They're getting beat the hell up, and they're finding ways to win.
They're gritty. They win the hard way too. And at least we had one of those types of games up until last week, which was disappointing because I think we were all expecting, Baker in that position, that offense at that position to deliver. And it was just a shitty way to lose a football game when our destiny was in our own hands. You hit a lot of really good points there, and they're all worth discussing. We just glaze over the fact that we're into using our wide receiver 4, 5, 6, 7 right now, and still somehow have one of the better records this franchise has ever had, going 9 games into the season. They're impressive, man. The guys are impressive. I questioned the Egbuka pick because I was like, what? No, I don't think most fans expected that. But to draft 2 guys that don't, this is a big stage and it's not too big for them. They belong here and they both act that way. Emeka's more mature than I am. I think we can all agree that guy's a man. He's a grown man, takes care of his business. I think he's impressed everybody on the entire team. And then Tez is completely cut from a different set of cloth. I don't know that he has so much confidence in his ability, and he should, by the way, because he's a freak. That I don't know that he feels pressure. He's just a natural out there. And then Sterling Shepard's been solid outside of the penalty he took, which I don't know, wasn't necessarily all his fault. It didn't look good though.
Last week for Sterling Shepard was the first like bad game he's had all year, which is 100% saying something when you consider, one, his age, his role in this wide receiver room, but two, how much better he is than he was last season. Like, I think there have been far and away more times this year where he's had to step up and be the guy in that wide receiver room to make a play, and he gets a critical 9 yards on third down and makes a conversion towards the end of the game on a game-winning drive. He's full of plays like that this season. And yeah, it was a boneheaded mistake against New England, but that game in itself, I think, is even more interesting when we start to dive into Baker Mayfield's comments and how the Buccaneers lost that game. I think a lot of things can be true about that game against the Patriots. I think people can say that the Buccaneers couldn't find much of a rhythm, and I think that's true, but I also think when you look at ultimately the dagger plays from New England were all the explosive plays, and like outside of that, Stank, I thought that they were in a position to win that game until the last 5 minutes. Regardless of Kyle Williams getting a 70-plus yard touchdown and their running back running all over us, I thought that at the very end of it, we needed this offense to step up and make a play. I thought that regardless of the explosives they had given up on defense, they were still in a position to win the game, especially after the Tyke Smith interception. So I want to dive into this Baker Mayfield quote, and I'm going to try and pull something up. So I'm going to buy myself some time here.
By the way, not enough is being made about this quote. We talked about it briefly on Monday's Loose Cannons podcast, but you could see the level of frustration on Baker's face, and it was directed at an individual. Felt like it. Maybe it was directed at a unit, but it felt like it was directed at an individual, but which is a bit concerning, seeing as he is the big dick swinging in this locker room. Like, for him to have that kind of frustration, it seems like it's something that has been ongoing, and he's just sick of it. He's tired of it.
All right, so we've got the graphic with the quote up on screen now. Baker Mayfield in his post-game press conference took to the podium and was asked, what is missing from this Bucs team right now? And he immediately, without skipping a beat, said, killer instinct. Quote, little things will get you beat. At some point, when stuff comes up during the week, whether it's mistakes or things that we talk about, and then it shows up on Sundays, you have to have pride about you. You got to have the fear of that failure and messing up for your teammates. You have to have that responsibility and accountability for the guys around you and get it fixed. I mean, obviously, we can take a ton from this quote. The gut check reaction is that this is a kick in the ass for the guys in the locker room. This is a team leader, a quarterback, demanding that the roster take a little bit more accountability for some of the areas that they have come up short. And I think it's, again, like you said, I think it's more geared towards, one player or one group of players. But that's also where the injury conversation comes in. So I want to get your take here and kind of get your read on Baker Mayfield airing out some frustration, some much needed frustration. I mean, he made a lot of good points. Another one being that, this is a loss for Tampa that should sting, because just like we said, up until that last 5 minutes, they still had a chance to step up, make a play, and they didn't do it. And it, thin margins in this game against New England, but they still had a chance to win, I thought. What do you make of Baker just laying it out there?
I like it, for one, because it sets up an accountability thing. I think whoever he's talking to probably knows who he's talking about, and to say it out in the media, whether it's a player or a unit or a coach, he's sent a clear message. And he always takes accountability for his mistakes. And he hasn't played great either. At times he's played great, but he's also been kind of I think he's a bit gun shy right now because of his injury. I think he's concerned about the pocket and his protection, and that's on his mind because you can see he's become more of a one read quarterback right now, which is why everybody's like, oh, he's locking onto a Mecca. He's locking onto a Mecca. He's locking onto his first read, and the Mecca touchdown wasn't though. That the opening drive, that was, he had a little bit of time and surveyed the field and Mecca got free. But I think by and large, he's on a fast clock. And so, we've been critical of some of the play calling. It hasn't all been bad, but I feel like situationally there's been some questionable play calls out there. And, that's the unit that right now that deserves the blame. And you can point to whoever you want. We know the injuries we just talked about. I don't think you can point to the receiver room. That's one group that stood the fuck up. Right. Yeah. They have all the reason in the world to not, be producing, but they have produced in crunch time. So it's gotta be offensive line related. And you can't point the finger at the guys filling in at guard right now.
Right.
And I doubt very seriously he's talking about 2-time Pro Bowler Tristan Wirfs, and Luke just came back. So if you want to do a little bit of a mystery solving, there's one guy who's been starting all year. He played multiple positions, but some of his play has been questionable, and that's Graham Barton. So I don't know. They're not going to come out and say it. Otherwise, he would have called him out or whoever out in the press conference. But that seems to be the guy I think that potentially Bake's talking about. Don't know though.
And I think it's valid because with Baker Mayfield, again, going back to the top, I think multiple things can be true here when we start to talk about the state of the offense, right? I think we can say that some of the play calling has left a little bit to be desired, especially down in the red area. That's where you see it the most, right? That's where you miss having a Mike Evans. That's where, unfortunately, for whatever reason, we're throwing fade routes to Sterling Shepard, right? Because you don't have a Mike Evans. And we love Emeka Egbuka, man, but I mean, he's not Mike Evans in the red zone yet. It might take a little bit of time, but he's certainly not that player as of right now. So that's going to be the conversation. But back to Baker, he's playing behind a beat-up offensive line. He's playing injured himself. Mm-hmm. I think the knee and the oblique injury, one of the big narratives around Baker Mayfield as of the last few weeks is, why isn't he running the football? I think it was most definitely kept the Buccaneers alive against San Francisco. It won them the game against Houston on 4th down. So Baker has made some of his best plays of the season, not only out of structure, but improvising with his legs to get out of the pocket. He hasn't been doing that. And mostly because of an inability to do that, it really sucks when he's immediately getting blown up from the interior of that offensive line, right? That's where a lot of the pressure seems to be coming from. Yep. And he's not able to do as much as he did out of that position. Now, with that being said, again, multiple things can be true here. And Baker said it himself. He does have to be a little bit better. Mm-hmm. I think when we talk about these rookie wide receivers stepping up, especially Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson, I know for a fact, would have at least one more touchdown on the season because Baker missed him, what was that, against Detroit? Mm-hmm. And Emeka Egbuka, I mean, we can count on two hands how many missed targets he's had to Egbuka this season. And Egbuka is still a top 10 target in the NFL guy. I think he's at 51 or something for the season, maybe a little bit more than that. But he's already having such an impressive rookie season, and if Baker was able to just kind of reel it in a little bit and hit him those few times, I'm curious how much better he would be performing. And then with the offense here, all of that also comes on to Josh Grizzard. Mm-hmm. Talk about the play calling, but circling it all back to the injuries, it's almost like a big Venn diagram. I wish I had it. The injuries become a bit of a conversation point for Josh Grizzard because how creative can he be when he's got one hand behind his back? He hasn't had Bucky Irving for the last 2 months. He's missing, again, his top 3 wide receivers. thank God these rookies have stepped up the way that they have. Cade Otton is still a very, very good, largely underrated tight end in the NFL. But the first 4 weeks of the season, he's blocking his ass off. And he's finally coming around. He had, 8 or 9 catches, I think, against New England. So he's a good safety net for Baker Mayfield, and he's got playmaking ability. He's stepping up, but I don't know, man. This is where the conversation ultimately just kind of leads me to a dead end, because I think all of these things can be true about the offense, but it's hard for me to definitively say one way or the other. I can't sit here and say, oh, Josh Grizzard looked like crap because, he isn't doing this and he isn't doing this. I find myself at a weird spot. I mean, everybody obviously finds themselves at a weird spot now with this Buccaneers offense, but with all of the things that we just mentioned, is it one of those things that you see ultimately getting better? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, they still have plenty of games to get right, plenty of football left. Even if they were to lose their next 2, they're still above 500, and they have a somewhat favorable schedule down the stretch. Not assuming they're going to make the postseason, because that's not going to get you anywhere. But do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Do you ultimately see the Bucs getting 1 or 2 more healthy pieces back, and then we get the juice back, if you will?
I do. I think the truth is it's complicated. I think they all deserve some of the to shoulder some of the blame. Josh, Graham, the offensive line. Offensive line play is choreography. If you've ever been around, and I'm not an X's and O's expert, I coached at Pee Wee level and a little bit in high school. That is probably cerebrally one of the toughest positions to play, especially at a higher level where you have so much going on. And then ask a center to do that when he's constantly having new guys to the left and the right of him, and then just so many interchangeable pieces, zero continuity whatsoever. And then the lack of continuity in regards to weapons. And oh, by the way, O'Keefe, a guy who was a piece of that blocking scheme, is gone as well, that nobody talks about. Then you have guys having to fill in and play different roles. Like Rashad, I'm sure, frustrated, would love to be out there, catching more passes instead of having to sit back there and play offensive lineman. So I think they're overall got to be frustrated, by it all. And Bake's probably, knows that he's got to be better too. But I think that potentially getting some pieces back, is something to feel good about, because we've won games against good competition, with all this chaos going on. So we're capable of winning in that environment. I feel like that's been in our DNA to win games when our back is against the wall, and to be scrappy and all that kind of shit. But you put yourself in a position where margin for error is thin, very thin. And if things don't go your way, you're losing football games. So we're facing a desperate opponent coming up here, and I know we'll get to the Bills game, and then probably the team that's playing the best in the NFL the following week in the Rams, who we just can't seem to beat no matter what. Yeah. Fuck the Rams, by the way. So yeah, it's not like the schedule's forgiving right now. It's not like they're going to sit around and feel sorry for us. We got to go up to Buffalo in that environment and hopefully get good, get back on track. But it's a big ask.
I think the offensive line, the Graham Barton situation, gets especially unfortunate when we kind of think about the contingency plan and what's really available to them right now. A lot of people bring up the possibility of moving Graham over to guard, right? He just seems like he'd be a better fit there, but it's simply not that easy at this stage of the game, right? We already know the Bucs are short with some reinforcements on the offensive line, but seemingly your backup center, Ben Bredesen, now going to be on the mend for the next couple of weeks. And I mean, behind that, their backup center was who? Elijah Klein. And I don't know if he's just MIA or what's going on with Elijah Klein. But then you think about a guy like Sua Opeta, who was here, less than a month ago? And he just sat on our practice squad for a year. I know he couldn't get healthy, and that was a bit unfortunate, but I find it hard to believe he wouldn't have been able to hold his own compared to a Mike Jordan or a Dan Feeney. No disrespect to those guys, but Mike Jordan especially, he's just been struggling, man. Everywhere the Bucs seem to place him on the line, he's not playing well. And then again, Graham, going back to that main point, all that stuff we said about Baker, getting that uneasiness in your offensive line. Unfortunately, where you're seeing a lot of that is these big guys in the interior just beating up on Graham Barton. And, hopefully it's something that gets better, but I don't know. I think it's just
a trust factor that's not there, right? The trust factor's just not there. And you can say what you want, and Baker is a dog, but he also doesn't want to get destroyed out there or really get hurt and really get injured. He's not stupid, he's not a reckless guy. He's a puncher. He is a Rocky Balboa and Rocky IV. Shout out to Evan. I saw your you love that movie, so I had to give you a little love here. But he's that guy. Yes, he's ready for the fight, but he needs to have some trust that he can go through his progressions and stand tall and make reads, because your first read isn't always open, and defenses get paid too. And we played some really good teams, who know what we're trying to accomplish. And I feel like Grizzard's probably in the same boat. He doesn't have a whole lot of trust either, which is why he's probably got, a select, group of plays that he just can't probably call, because it's a continuity thing. And, guys got to know where they need to be at. So plus he's learning what's right and what isn't, and you got to give him a little bit of slack, I guess. But you already know, man, the offensive coordinator is that position that you are going to be in the crosshairs if things aren't going right, especially considering how well it went for Liam and Nine Piece Dave to an extent. Although we had some frustrating times with him too. The bar is high. When you took that job, you knew that, and the record's great. So it's hard to be like, well, we're not 2-7 right now, but it just seems like there's been some questionable things at critical times, which maybe you got to point to him, or maybe you got to, point to the whole group and just say they all got to be better.
I think one of the things that's especially true about this last game, I don't want to say this game's going to be an outlier, because it's like the margins in that game were thin enough, and we already talked about the explosive plays, and the defense played somewhat well in a position to have them win at the end of the game. They continued their streak of takeaways, which is something we'll talk about here in a little bit when we get to Todd Bowles and the defense, which more than pleased with at this point, if I'm being completely honest with you. But the big thing that we didn't talk about is just a lack of preparation. And I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this. Todd Bowles gave the Buccaneers 7 days off in the bye week. And I'm not saying that that's the reason they played bad. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have done that. But, I mean, we've heard that that's just not usual. Right? Like Rondé Barber said on his show last week, he played 16 years in the NFL and never took a bye week that was 7 days off.
Yeah, but Rondé
and listen.
It's like talking to your grandfather about like how he was raised. Like, you know what I mean? Like they played the woodshed. He was breathing in jet fumes every practice.
Yeah. Used to walk to school in the snow both ways uphill. Yeah.
Right. So now, the Players Association, they're not even letting these guys practice many hours during the day, much less running 2 a days and all the shit that he had to go through.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a soft ass league. No doubt about it. Rondé's right. He's right. But we're banged the fuck up. So I get it from Todd's perspective. It's probably like, these guys need rest, physically need rest.
Well, that was that was the main thing. I mean, headed into the bye week, just like you said, everybody was pounding the table. These guys need rest. Thank God for the bye week. Let's just get right. get healthy, and try to get as many people as we can. So, like, with that being the expectation headed into it, it's hard to be super shocked, but I don't know. I just hope that at the end of the day, with Baker Mayfield being, I don't want to say passive, but with Baker kind of calling some guys out, some guys frustrated in the locker room, you hope that it resonates enough to help them just kind of lock the hell in. I think for lack of a better term, Bowles preached all week. You don't want to be that team coming out flat after the bye week, and the Buccaneers offense was just that. So hoping that can turn things around this week.
Outside of the scripted plays, and we got to stop, and then we're like, oh, all right,
yeah,
we're off and running, and then man, it's just like we fell off our bike and we walked the rest of the game. I don't know. It just they never got the rhythm back, and then we were playing catch up after that. Extremely intelligent end of half series for New England. I don't know if they, intentionally tried to run the clock out on us.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm sure they probably didn't want to be in the position where they had to, make an incredible play to score there, but they played it exactly right. Then came out and, got the big hit, and next thing you know, it's like you just hit the canvas twice, even though you won, the first 5 rounds. Like this team was reeling after that, and then you're in catch-up mode, and it's a whole different level of intensity. But they didn't go down without a fight, so it does give you a bit of, encouragement. Like, this team didn't lay down when that happened, and it was against a good opponent. And we got into the position where we had an opportunity to take control and potentially win the game towards the end too. So it's just frustrating. And then if you're at the stadium surrounded by a bunch of massholes, you just got to feel that afterwards and hear them cheering and taking over our stadium and all that fun stuff we're all so used to here as Bucs fans.
The thing about Mike Vrabel in that game, I mean, 2 things. First, I was watching it home on the broadcast, and I don't know if that guy ever shuts up on the sidelines. Like, every time there was a camera on him, he was just jabbering away in his headset. And I mean, he's a great coach, so you got to give him that. You talked about the end of the first half, that sequence there where they purposefully burn the clock down to 8 seconds before throwing the touchdown to Stephon Diggs. Are you familiar with the South Park episode where there's like a loophole to get your medical marijuana card?
No.
There's the GIF from it. I don't want to be too out of hand here, but
wait, you have me on the show. Now's the time to become out of hand.
You ever seen the
we
thing
talk about on my show, right? We haven't talked about Johnson's on the show yet, so it could get weird.
Have you seen the thing? It's like a GIF or a meme or whatever, and it's Randy from South Park riding around on his bag.
No, I've never seen it.
That makes it even more awkward now. Somebody's going to know what I'm talking about, but I felt like that was Mike Vrabel on the sideline. Just kind of took his boys out, put them on the table, if you will. That was a calculated risk there at the end of the first half. And I think when we start to talk about this coaching matchup and really shifting the conversation into Todd Bowles into the defense, plenty pleased with the defense, and we will get to that momentarily. But I want to talk to you about Todd Bowles and his progression as a head coach here in Tampa. I think that a lot of the good things said about him throughout the first 10 weeks of the season are more than warranted, right? I think the acquisition of Zach Beislein over the offseason, some of the personnel changes he made in his coaching staff, I think we are seeing the effects of that. Being a little more aggressive on 4th down this season, choosing to go for it, staying on the field, even when he may not want to deep down in his gut. He's had better inklings this year and fewer time management issues, right? That's something that we complained about time and time again over the last several seasons with Bowles here in Tampa as head coach. But you look at this coaching matchup and you look at a move like that from Mike Vrabel, and then you look at Todd Bowles and his management of Benjamin Morrison. And we talk about the thin margins in this game, the explosive plays, that Kyle Williams 75-yard touchdown was literally like Benjamin Morrison's second play of the game. He only played 10 snaps, which isn't entirely out of the ordinary. I thought he was playing a little bit more than that, but he usually gets a couple of series when he rotates in and out with Jamel Dean. But what's critical about the explosive plays and some of the mistakes, he did draw the pass interference, so he had that flag go against him also. But like the Patriots were very clearly picking on Benjamin Morrison.
Yeah.
Once he was in the game, he was a target, and you hate to see that happen, especially with a rookie corner. But it's par for the course in the NFL. At that point, as a defensive coach, Todd Bowles, I would think, can very clearly see what's going on. And we didn't get Jamel Dean, and at times didn't have Zion McCollum back in the game. That management there, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but you know, we talk about the discussion of Todd Bowles so far this season, and I think that you can be objective here and talk about the highs and the lows. I think there's been more highs than lows this season with Todd Bowles, but the Buccaneers coming out flat from the bye week, and then that decision there. What is your take on Bowles here throughout the season so far?
Yeah, I don't like that at all. You know, it's one thing when you're up and you're putting a guy in to get some experience, but to take a guy off the field who's arguably the hottest guy in the secondary, you know, from his football standpoint, maybe physically too, depending on what you like. But the guy right now is playing at a high level, and clearly the it's a financial thing here, because they obviously are going to move on from Jamel. Otherwise, why feel the pressure to force a guy onto the field? But it's a weird reason to do that. Unless you're in the position, like I said, where you got the opportunity, or injury happens to come into you know, play, and then you want to get you're forced to get the guy some reps. So yeah, I don't necessarily love it. And clearly Josh McDaniels was prepared for that, and he'd seen it on tape, and he's like, all right. And he's probably got somebody up there, or he saw it, you know, and somebody's like, the kid is in, let's go, let's attack him. Because they found our weakness, they attacked it, and it wasn't completely his fault. I think Tyke kind of took a bad angle, or you know, he was in the mix on that play as well, but wasn't in a position to help afterwards. So we got hit. But you know, I think Ben's eventually going to be a good football player. But yeah, when stuff like that happens, you got to ask yourself, why? Why are we doing that? I mean, we know he has a rotation on the interior line, frustrating at times to see, but that's just how Todd rolls. And I think a lot of defensive line coaches rotate guys in, but rotating secondary pieces, that'd be out of the ordinary.
Yeah. I mean, we've gotten used to the defensive line rotation, as you said. We'll talk about the depth here in a minute, because some of those rotational guys are playing very well, especially on the interior. But I don't think this Benjamin Morrison thing would be as big of a deal as it is if Jamel Dean wasn't far and away the Bucs' best corner this season. And by certain metrics, he's, you know, one of the better corners in the NFL. And I know sample size is a big thing too. Been rotating snaps more this year than ever. But, you know, it seems like it would be a simple concept to leave your impact players on the field. And I think that there were just a couple too many times in that game against New England where everybody was kind of curious where things were going. I still like Todd Bowles as a coach, though. I'm not, you know, I'm not at the point where I'm jumping on Twitter and saying, fire Todd Bowles, or even second guessing Josh Grizzard, simply because of everything that we've talked about up until this point. But I do want to dive a little bit more into this defense here and some of the guys who are stepping up. And I guess we can start with that interior defensive line. But guys like Elijah Simmons and guys like Elijah Roberts especially, didn't think we were going to see this much of Elijah Roberts so far in 2025. But, I mean, he's answering the call, man, with Kalijah Cansey down for the year. We're seeing more and more of this kid, and I don't want to overreact, but I hope he's here for a while, because he's pretty damn good.
He is. Both Elijahs have been welcome. You know, but they've shown that they belong out there. Thank goodness, because you know that position's been decimated too. You know, we drafted a guy to potentially help us. You know, and lost him. For some reason, I'm drawing a blank, but you know, I don't have too many criticisms of the defensive line play. Considering my openly, distaste for what I've seen from Hassan Reddick so far. And I know he's played well at times, okay? And I talk a lot of shit. But I feel like that guy hasn't necessarily been what we've needed, from that edge piece that's a game changer. And, maybe it's not his fault. Maybe that's just not who he is anymore. But, I think by and large, hasn't been like the offensive line where it's just been this, glaring problem. I think the defensive line has played well enough. I think the defense as a whole has played well enough. And the guy who gets most of the hate, Dennis, he's even played well in certain situations. So it's easy to Todd's an easy target because he's just not a guy who shows his teeth very often. And I think people take his kindness as weakness kind of deal. Especially coming off of the back of Bruce Arians, who's the polar opposite of him, and a guy who wears it all on his face and will tell you what he thinks, and is that more of that Dan Campbell kind of guy who just radiates that energy on the sideline and kind of wills his team in a different way. But Todd's been able to use that calmness to an advantage, because we've just discussed how much shit this team has gone through, and how it would be easy to blame all the things we've talked about for a losing record, but we're atop the NFC South. We're 6-3, and there's been a lot of good, a whole lot of good, actually.
I think what's funny about Servassier Dennis, I'm trying to pull the numbers up here because I had them, and I need to find them again. I gotta get better about bookmarking stuff. That's the one feature that I never use. I don't bookmark anything. But Servassier Dennis, believe it or not, being the glaring weakness he was in coverage at some point, these last couple of weeks, has stepped it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, outside of the coverage issues, which again are still to be debated, because how consistently better can he be? We will find out. But he's not too bad in run support, and he can get after the quarterback every now and again. He's got a handful of sacks this year. Talking about this defensive line, really just this Todd Bowles unit, the pass rush is something that gets talked about a lot too. And I think that this is something that's very nuanced when we talk about Todd Bowles and his pass rush and how he likes to attack the quarterback. It's no secret that he mixes up defensive fronts, but in doing so, he's sending all kinds of different guys after the quarterback. I mean, Jamel Dean has a sack this year from lining up as an edge rusher. And I think when you look at this Buccaneers defense, there's like 7 or 8 different players who have at least a sack. Or I think it's even more than that. I think it's like 7 or 8 that have at least 2 sacks. Because, you're getting strong play from a young nickel corner and Jacob Parrish. Tyke Smith is making plays. Antoine Winfield Jr. is back to playing like an all-pro. Jamel Dean has been as electrifying as he has been this season. They are no stranger to, sending these guys at the quarterback in different ways. And I think that that's one of the things we can say Bowles has done really well, and I think is one of the biggest reasons that this defense feels so much better than it was last season. The takeaways are a given, right? But we keep saying thin margins with that New England Patriots game. I swear to God, Stank, they should have had like 5 or 6 sacks on that day. And it's just because Drake May gets the ball out a hair too quick.
Mm-hmm.
And it is for whatever reason, they don't finish it. But when we talk about pressure, we talk about affecting a quarterback, Drake May played well. The explosive plays, again, are going to kind of carry his stat line. But when you look at his day, outside of a 70-plus yard touchdown and the offense doing the rest of the work that they did, I thought that maybe a handful of other 20, 30-plus yard chunk plays. But this pass rush, their dynamic ability to affect QBs, I think that that's just going to continue to win them games here down the stretch. I think that we are back to, hopefully a place that I think is good for Todd Bowles. But here down the stretch, we talk about the offense getting healthier. I think the defense is just going to have to keep doing what they've been doing, kicking ass and winning some of these games for Tampa Bay, which, I like to see a potent defense more than I like to see a potent offense every single week, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, because that's you were raised a Bucs fan, and so the first taste of success we ever had, we were a defensive franchise. We got arguably one of the greatest defenses in the history of the game. So that leaves an impression on Bucs fans, especially the old school guys who just love defense. Like, we were raised on it. We know what it's supposed to look like. Different game now, and you can't hit like you're supposed to, anymore. Like, the league's soft and they want points, and it's fantasy football and all that shit. There's a lot of reasons we'll never see defenses like that again, or you won't see them often, not consistently anyways. But yeah, you know what really helps the defense too? A lead. And we haven't really had the benefit of playing with the lead. It helps your pass rushers pin their ears back and go eat, having a lead. Putting teams in obvious passing situations, being able to dictate, a little bit. And they just haven't had that benefit, because it's like when the offense was rolling, the defense hadn't gotten their feet yet, or the special teams was just a disaster, and that they were contributing to the failures that we've had. So it's just been, we haven't seen all three phases all at once humming. We haven't seen that resounding dominant type victory. Don't know that we will either, just because all of our ailments aren't going to get better overnight, and maybe we get healthy towards the end of the season and stay healthy, but that's a big if too.
I found this statistic here. Thank you to Josh Capo for pulling this. Per PFF, Servassier Dennis in coverage weeks 1 through 4. 18 targets, 16 catches, an 89% catch rate allowed with 299 yards tacked on. Weeks 5 through 10. 24 targets, 20 catches, an 83% catch rate allowed, with 185 yards to tack on to the end of that. So, listen, I know that just kind of sounds like numbers. And to be honest, it also just kind of sounds like numbers to me. But I see progress. I see marginal progress. And listen, if this guy can show improvement, I'm not saying he is the answer, because it wouldn't shock me if the Bucs doubled up at linebacker in the draft, especially with the class that we have coming up here. But I just want to see him improve. This is a guy who at one point, unfortunately, as of right now, he is the guy who's become the easy scapegoat for this Buccaneers defense. But I think if he can show improvement over the year, he's, I just want him to get back to the guy that the Bucs were so high on. The narrative.
His defense, he hasn't played a full season yet. Like, this is technically like his rookie season in a weird way. And yes, he had, I don't know how many games he started before he played the season, but it hasn't been a whole lot.
It was like 3.
Right. So he's new too. He's a new piece too to this puzzle for and kids are allowed to get better. Ask Rondé how good he was when he first started in this league. He's been open about how trash his gameplay was at times. I think not every player, but lots of players, can see leaps in their game and figure out what their holes are, and go back and figure out how to study tape better and pick up on cues and keys and all the stuff that makes, good players great and decent players good. It's not just your athletic ability. It's seeing it, especially at the linebacker position. You got to see it first and then anticipate it. And instead of guessing all the time or just, letting your instincts take you in the wrong direction, because offenses do a lot of trickery. And on top of that, it's a hard job. Covering a running back as a linebacker, hard to do. So there's a lot that you could say to excuse this kid's, some of the stuff we've seen out there. Maybe he gets better. We don't have anybody behind him. It's not like anybody's coming to save us. I say that all the time. Jason Light's not clearly decided he's not bringing anybody in to save us, and that's fine. I think it's a gamble. that they're willing to take? Maybe does that mean that they feel like they've got the pieces? Obviously, it means like they feel like they got the pieces to can still get this thing done. I don't have that type of intestinal fortitude. I panic. I want to see us get better overnight, like a lot of fans do. So it can be frustrating.
Looking ahead to Buffalo, the Buccaneers playing the Bills this week on the road, going up to Buffalo for their coldest game in years. Over the last 4 seasons, they've only played 2 games below, I think it's 50 degrees. So they've kind of lucked out. No snow on the schedule, but it does seem like it is going to be a gloomy, potentially rainy, cold afternoon up there in Buffalo. When you size up this Bills team and you kind of get that first gut reaction about this game coming up, I think people look at the Bills and they look at the Rams and, you kind of want to shit your pants. But I think the Bills have a lot of similarities to Tampa Bay right now, especially in just trying to find a rhythm on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm curious where your expectations are for this game this week.
I mean, James Cook, I'm sure he's just been drooling and foaming at the mouth after watching, what we let a rookie running back do to us this, just the last coming week. I think they're going to continue to try to test us to see if we can stop the run. Stopping Josh Allen is hard enough as it is because he's part of the running game. They have to have this win. I mean, they have to have this win. We're in great position compared to them. This is a fucking must-win game for them. And this is going to be a playoff game for them because they can't afford to lose many more games as well as, New England's playing. And so hopefully it brings our best out, and sometimes desperation can cause them to fold even further. They got whooped up by a division opponent last week. We know it can happen in division games, right? How many times have we needed to beat Carolina and come out and nearly lost or drop games we should have won to an inferior opponent because they're division rivals and they have no fear of you and all the things, right? So this is different. We don't see each other, although we've seen each other quite often recently. We don't see each other a ton, and we're gonna get their best fucking effort. And so maybe that brings the best out of us too, because we need it from a confidence standpoint more than from a record standpoint.
Yeah. You talked about James Cook, and I think that getting back to that Buccaneers run defense we've known and love, New England, we talked about it on the post-game show. That's the first team to just run the ball directly at Tampa and find that level of success. Like, there are some teams that have kind of broken through and had an okay day, 50, 60, 75 yards on the ground here. But, I mean, they exploded. And, yeah, 2 big chunk plays. But you got to get back to that because I think if you can neutralize James Cook, they can handle Josh Allen. He's got that dual threat ability. And, yeah, the Buccaneers tend to struggle sometimes with the guys who can improvise out of the pocket. But, I mean, they don't have a rhythm on the offensive side of the ball, at least not yet. I don't think Josh Allen is fully comfortable with that group of wide receivers. It's not a deep room. And I think that if this is the week that they finally figure things out on the offensive side of the ball, if you can come out and go through your scripted plays in the first series of the game like you had last week and then just keep that up, it'd be interesting to see if Buffalo can keep up. I mean, not to discredit Josh Allen, dude, because he's perennial MVP every single year. He's always one of those guys. So he's one of the few quarterbacks in the league where, regardless of how thin their wide receiver room is and regardless of how effective James Cook is, he could still find a way to win that damn game. And it's, a lot easier said than done when we preview what the Bucs have on the table versus Buffalo. But I like to think they can somewhat get the offense going this week. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see more Sean Tucker. That's another thing, too, is that, even in the loss last week, even though they couldn't find much of anything consistently, I thought they consistently ran the ball well in certain situations. Had a number of decent third down conversions. And, Rachaad White's fine. I don't have terrible things to say about Rachaad White. We should be grateful he's on the team, but I do just want to see more carries for Sean Tucker. I'd like to see a little bit more of an explosive element from this Bucs run game. I don't know how explosive Tucker can be, but we all love to bring up that game in New Orleans last year. The guy was a machine, and I think he certainly has some of that playmaking ability still in there.
He definitely does. And I think even Rachaad would say, like, if you're going to compare the three backs, Rachaad can definitely make plays on his own, but he's not the explosive type necessarily. He's a physical guy. He can run through tackles. He's real smart, has high football IQ. But Tucker's a bit bouncier. He can kind of get out on the perimeter. He's a bit quicker and shiftier, and they're just different backs. And then Bucky's a different animal. I said before the Seattle game, and I was like, oh, I'm an idiot, that the loss of Bucky is we just lost the engine of this offense. And then we came out and, looked incredible on offense in Seattle. But since then, we've seen a drop off because Bucky can do it on his own, which is why I love Tez so much, because I feel like Tez could do it on his own in space. And we don't utilize him underneath very often, or him in the short passing game. Not everything has to be outside. We don't attack the middle of the field. And maybe it's because Bake's getting pressure in his face, and it's harder to attack, things down the seams a little bit. Everything seems to be out to the outside a little bit, or longer developing plays, because we know Josh Grisard likes to attack teams over the top and deep, and it's one of those things. But do we get Bucky back this week, or are we running and gunning with the group that we've had? I guess we can't assume that we will. Yes, Buffalo's a beatable football team, but we've got to protect Baker, right? And we've got to be consistent and move the chains and be intelligent and not shoot ourselves in the foot, not turn the ball over, and continue to be stout on defense in order for us to get a win, because that environment's going to be awesome. That's that's going to be one of the better games to attend, and I'm sure we'll be up for it. It's going to be a dogfight.
I think Buffalo's slated to get a new stadium here soon too. So this could be the Buccaneers' last game that they play in Buffalo. New Era Stadium, I think, is what it's still called, if I'm not mistaken. Now, another thing as well, looking ahead to this matchup, I think defensively, I'm not too worried. We just talked about Josh Allen, and I don't want to eat those words, because like any quarterback on a good day can, make the Bucs defense bend. But I truly think this defense is going to go out there and do their job. And even if it feels like a bend but don't break performance, like, I think you'll have somebody potentially step up and take the ball away. I think that they are going to effectively get after Josh Allen a little bit. Josh Allen being one of the better guys in the NFL at getting away from pressure and improvising. So that's going to be something we're in store for. But if you can consistently pressure him, you could pressure him into making a mistake. We talked about James Cook being potentially lethal as a receiver out of the backfield, but they don't have Dalton Kincaid. And like, that's an area where the Bucs have struggled this year also, is tight ends.
This year.
Yeah, I know.
Forever. How about forever?
For the last decade and a half.
Outside of the Super Bowl, where we shut down Kelsey, we just typically get owned by tight ends.
Yeah. No, you're 100%. So I think, tackling is going to be a big thing this week for Tampa Bay. But guys like Servassier Dennis are tackling a lot better now than they were this time a month and a half ago. And another thing, heading into this, we'll kind of put a bow on it with this. The last time the Bucs lost a game at home, they went on the road and put up 38 against Seattle. And we see how Darnold's playing. We see that the Seahawks are for real. So a lot of people want to hark on the 3 losses that they have so far this season. Those 3 losses to NFC powerhouses, mind you. Detroit, Philadelphia, and most recently, the AFC New England Patriots, who I'm not going to say that they're not as good as people think they are, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, you know what helps a young quarterback? 2 long running touchdowns.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I get the kid he's doing what he needs to do, man. He's not. Honestly, he did make a critical mistake, and had we made him pay for it, that would be the narrative right now. But they ended up winning, and nobody's going to talk about the incredible play Tyke made to almost save the fucking football game. But yeah, we've lost against big punchers, man. And so I don't think it's going to be, any, resounding victory on either side of the ball or for either team. I think it's going to be one of those games, kind of like I described before, man, where we're last man standing kind of shit. I would love to have a resounding victory. It would be a whole lot better on my health, my mental health, my blood pressure, all the things. And would kind of get this bad taste out of our mouth right now, because I feel like Bucs fans are bracing for the fall off in some way, because we haven't had a whole lot of great luck, although we've won a lot of football games. It's just been, even in wins, sometimes you leave with a bad taste in our mouth. So, yeah.
Well, it's that midseason slump that everybody's worried about, too. It's almost a signature move for Todd Bowles at this point. And as of right now, it's like we're desperately trying to wade water to get out of it. Yeah, they're 6-3. They're in a very cush position. And hopefully it isn't one of those snowball effects where all of a sudden they're 6-9 or something awful like that. But I don't think so. I think that this is a get-right week for Tampa Bay. And I think at the end of the day, this game against Buffalo, I need the offense to make a play. I don't think of a road game in Buffalo being a place to settle in, but Baker's got to settle in a little bit this week. Just like everybody else has got to step up, and all pros got to play like all pros, and your offensive line has to, kind of help him out a little bit. I think that when he is available, he can't miss some of the stuff that he's been missing the last few weeks. So I hope for Josh Grizzard to get these guys back on the right track this week. They look great. The first drive of the game last week. Hopefully they can replicate that and continue that over the course of 60 minutes. It's going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight here against the Buffalo Bills. But ladies and gentlemen, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think you're exactly right. It's consistency is what's been missing. And I think that's why we all feel as uneasy as we do, really, in every aspect of this team. We just haven't been consistent anywhere. We can't consistently score. We can't consistently run the ball. We can't consistently protect. Even the passing game hasn't been consistent. And so it's hard to feel good when you just don't know what you're going to get week in, week out. And the other two phases the same. You don't know what you're going to get from the special teams. We think that our defense is going to be stout enough. And as of recent, they've been out there carrying this football team. And so they've probably been the most consistent piece of this team so far. You'd hope that we get to settle down a little bit and really, find our footing, so we can kind of form that identity. And it can't just be Baker, magic. That can't be the identity, because it's not going to last, man.
Yeah, it's definitely not sustainable. And this is the best chance we have all season to see how the Bucs react to getting called out. And I mean, they're not getting called out by anybody. Their quarterback went to the podium and was like, hey, our guys got to be better. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When you're called out at that level, you have to some degree, answer the call. And I'm curious to see them do that this week with a tough test on the road in Buffalo. What do you got? Any final thoughts, my friend, before we wrap this bitch on up?
No, man. It's show me. At this point, you don't need to get up for a game like this. If you do, you shouldn't be on in the NFL or on this football team. This is going to be, one of those games that hopefully, we can continue to beat teams in crunch time moments and not see what we saw last week, or maybe just not be in a crunch time moment to begin with and kind of coast to a victory. That would be great.
Yeah, good chance for the Buccaneers to react to be called. Good God, good chance for the Bucs to react to being called out, and it's also a good chance for them to prove that they can beat those top tier teams. I know the Bills are in a bit of disarray right now, but we just talked about Josh Allen. They gush about him for an hour every single day at the top of SportsCenter, so he's one of those guys. And if you can beat one of those guys in the NFL, people are going to pay attention for better or worse. I kind of like when the Bucs
Allen yet, have we? The Bucs haven't beat Josh Allen yet, right?
They beat him with Brady. Remember the
Did we?
OT win?
Oh, my
Perryman
memory's-
touchdown.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That's the only one I can think of, though.
Terrible memory, but yeah. Okay, well,
No, I think of
it's time for Baker to get. It's time for Baker to get. I mean, he already talked shit about him in the press conference. Said he's 6'10" with small hands,
Small
bro.
hands.
Those are those are fighting words. Those are definitely fighting words. So I like it. I like it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this midweek edition of the Cannon Fire podcast. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us tonight. Live in the YouTube chat, Richard T. from the West Coast, Brent O'Neill, Bill Camporis, Loose Cannons Vixen, Rolf Steinbauer Sports, Tampa Guy. There's a few other. Port Richie Lou, man. I can't forget Lou.
Lose the shit.
Yeah, dude.
What's up, Vixen? Look at you know what, man? We have a really good fan base. A select grouping of fans who die hard for this team. I just wish more of them would show up to the games on Sundays and not be bitches and sell their tickets.
You're not wrong. I think the sad part of it is like I've just come to terms with it. As a fan,
You have to.
The acceptance is hard. And I know that there's a lot of people who are very passionate about Tampa Bay and they're very passionate about, people will get red in the face talking about people who sell their tickets and all of these different, all these different fan bases that travel well and come down here. Man, that's just the way it is. It's Tampa. All these people, all these Pittsburgh fans, all these Philly fans, these massholes you were talking about who were just in Raymond James Stadium chanting fucking MVP for Drake May. All of these people live here already.
I know they do.
5-6 years ago, man, they sold all their houses, moved away from the snow, and they came down here to clog up the roads and make everything super expensive. So,
been that way my whole life. I don't know why I expect anything different. Now that I've traveled quite a bit, going to different stadiums and seeing some of the atmospheres and like, it's just, I want that. I want what Seattle has.
Yeah.
Seattle wasn't a football juggernaut. Like they built that. They built a culture there. The environment is fucking awesome. And fans love it and they're part of it. They feel like it, like as much as I hate the Saints, like those fans die for their fucking football team, dude. And I hate to use them as an example, but I just want more of that. And we do have fans who die for this team, but not the ones who necessarily spend their money, and not on the corporate level and people who have the expendable income here. They just don't give a fuck. And I'm sitting around a lot of them. They don't care. Half of them are on their fucking phones anyways.
Yeah.
Or they're just, mingling inside. They're not even sitting in their seats. So I don't know how to fix it. I don't like you said, it's almost one of those things we're going to have to fucking accept and, we'll do our part, I guess.
One of the things that hurts the most about it, and I think makes it feel a little bit different. We'll wrap it up with this. The Bucs have a good team. They've had a good product on the field for at least the last 5-6 years. I know we can talk back and forth about the Bulls years. We can talk about 2022 with Tom Brady. They were winning games. They were making the postseason. They're winning the division. They are winning football games more than they ever did throughout the 2010s, the second half of the 2000s. Like, I do think that this is the first time in a long time that there is a reason for a city to rally behind a football team, especially one that's playing well, and you have as much star power as you do. And yeah, like you said, man, it sucks. It is what it is. Oh well. The only thing we can do is go on our little podcast and bitch and complain about it. So with that being said,
just beating the shit out of Buffalo and Josh Allen and embarrassing them. Just embarrassing them, right? And Todd Bowles throws his headset and gets gritty. Like maybe we just need that kind of resounding victory so that those out there who are doubting and like, what, I just don't know what I'm gonna expect. Maybe we need to earn their confidence back. I don't know.
Yeah, you may be right, my friend. But thank you to everybody for hanging out with us live tonight. Thank you to my guest, Stank Bastard from the Loose Cannons podcast. Stank, where can the people find you and your great content?
loosecannonslive.com, Loose Cannons on YouTube, or at Stank Bastard on Twitter. You can find me there, and I'll be dropping my band list tomorrow around noon. So you already know. I mean, it's pretty obvious. There's going to be a few things in there that you probably like buffalo wings. You better eat them tonight because they're going to be banned tomorrow. And I feel like that's one of the reasons we haven't played very well because nobody respects my list. Nobody fucking respects my list. So maybe that's where we can be better.
Fall in line a little bit. Let's do it for the sake of the team.
I've seen a lot of fat fans, and I ban obesity every week. And there's just I've never seen more fat Bucs fans. So we got to do better.
We really do, man. Follow the show on social media: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show, and of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Rhettakus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. And please check out this week's episode of the Rondé Barber Show. I get to produce that with the fine people at WFLA. New episode came out today. And every Wednesday, you can find it with video on YouTube and any podcast platform. Just search up the Rondé Barber Show. Thank you again to everybody for hanging out with us tonight. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Stank Bastard. We will see you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.
Go Bucs.